Hey guys, Mutantcowboy here. There's some things I think as a community we need to actually talk about, and we can all agree that Division Two is not really in a great place. State of the game is supposed to come back on the 8th, I believe, but before then, I wanted to address some things, talk about some things I've seen, and talk about the community as a whole. To start off, I think I want to kind of make this my own little state of the game right now. Now, I'm not trying to call out Fred here. Obviously, his communication with the player base on Twitter is probably one of the only bright sides of the game currently. And I'm not trying to blame him or make him look bad. I'm not trying to do that, right? I just think that some of the issues that he talks about on Twitter are really worth bringing up and taking a look at. I honestly hope that we do see more of this communication because, one of the biggest problems with the game is just the anger in the community. Especially, at the devs, right? And I mean, it's bad already, so I mean, I'm not really going to make that worse. But, at least with him talking to us, there's at least some direction to put that anger at. I mean, otherwise, it just runs rampant in the community where players are just blaming players. PvE's blaming PvP and PvP's blaming PvE, and there's just bad communication in general from that. So, since we all want a better game, right? I mean, that's just honesty. We all want a better game. Knowing this stuff helps us address issues and reduces some of that toxicity. Misinformation and wild speculation are kind of behind all that, right? When we don't understand the issues, when we don't know what we're talking about, when players just make random assumptions and, kind of talk out their ass, that hurts the community as a whole because then player rage gets built around something that isn't actually a reason. I'm going to be speculating a little bit, but I'm trying to actually dig into the problems rather than just, attacking fellow players or just attacking the devs for, no random reason, right? So the first tweet that I want to address from Frederick actually is a very serious implication, basically, if you actually look at it and critically think about it. Basically, what he said, obviously right off the bat, it's very simple. The console platforms that this game is made for cannot render that many Division 2 agents at good frame rate. They are more visually detailed and customizable than Division 1 agents. Basically what he's saying is that the original Xbox One and the original PlayStation 4 are not good enough to render the game with that many agents in the dark zone. What I don't think he intended to say is actually a very bad implication of the game itself and probably of Massive and Ubisoft. It's just, it makes them look bad when you think about it like this. Basically, Division 2 prioritized graphics and basically just the engine in general over the actual gameplay. So what we had in Division 1, they can't create that anymore because they chose to upgrade the graphics to such a state that it is unplayable in the past iteration of the game. That's terrible. I mean, I'm never one for graphics over gameplay. I mean, there's just no point in upgrading your graphics so much that it actually hurts the game. I don't understand a reason for that. The only reason for that is because in game publishing, it is a lot easier to make a flashy game that sells, more copies and makes more money than it is to actually make a good, AI system or a good coding system that actually, builds the game up and makes it good because you can't sell that, right? You can't sell better AI, but you can definitely sell better graphics. And, that's just a huge problem with AAA gaming today. Another point that he kind of, honestly, I don't think he meant to say this, or at least meant it to be taken this way, but he says that they are more visually detailed and customizable than Division 1 agents. What I take from that, they wanted to have as much options for the player to, equip things or add things or basically make them stand out so that they could make more money on microtransactions. They wanted to have all these little customizable things and all these little details and all these little, doodads on your agent so that they could basically just, make more money by selling you random ass, gimmicky shit. I mean, that's terrible. If they added all these cosmetics just so they could make more money off microtransactions at the expense of the actual game itself, I mean, that's just disgusting, right? Now, that's not exactly what he's saying, but, you can kind of read it between the lines. I mean, why else would you have more visually detailed and customizable agents at the cost of the game. I mean, we already see it in the game, right? With all these microtransactions, I mean, they're rampant. It's basically just the only thing that they can really steadily add to the game are cosmetic events. If that's the case and this is the result of it, well, obviously that's just shit. I mean, no lie, no getting around it. I mean, that's just a terrible thing. If you're building your game and making your game suffer off of microtransactions, there's no excuse for that. So, what does that mean for the DZ as a whole? What does this mean? Well, because of apparently microtransactions and because of graphical priority over gameplay, the DZ is probably never going to get a player upgrade. We are never going to see an expansion of the DZs. We're never going to see an increase in the player count. And honestly, I just find that unacceptable. I don't see the reason. I mean, Division 1 graphics were good, right? They were good enough for the gameplay. And, to be honest, I mean, even ignoring the fact that they weren't as good as the original trailers for the Division, right? They were still good for their time. Obviously, they're not as good now, but it's still quite enjoyable and easy to play, right? It's not terrible. It doesn't look like an eyesore. There is no reason for them to do this, right? It's not an acceptable thing in my book. So for the DZ, I mean, for basically any player-related activity, we're not going to see the player count, which this also means that, something like Last Stand isn't going to happen because, you can't have that many players. And all this stuff, basically, you're limited to a 6v6 at most, apparently. Obviously, I don't know what the exact cap is. I don't know if, maybe the frame rate starts to slow down at like 15, or maybe it starts to slow down at 14. But at the same time, they're trying to keep it in multiples of 4 so that, you can actually have groups together, right? That's kind of the basic idea of it. Obviously, it's pretty clear, though, that if they keep this the same way it is, they're not going to be able to add in more players to the Dark Zone, right? Now, obviously, there's an incredibly easy solution. I mean, why don't they just add in some sort of graphical reduction for the original Xbox One and the original PlayStation 4 to, basically just allow those consoles to generate more players, right? Why don't they do that? I mean, they very easily could do something like that. Now, obviously, that's not something that they probably want to do or advertise that they have to do, but it's something that could possibly be done. If they can't have that many players in the Dark Zone because of graphics, then reducing the graphics is obviously an easy fix to that problem. Now, obviously, I don't know at which point, does the Xbox One X and the PlayStation 4 Pro, what point do they catch up, right? I don't know. I don't know if the Xbox One X could handle 24 characters with the updated graphics. I don't know that. I'm pretty sure PCs could, obviously. There is an outlier, then reduce the graphics on that outlier. Do not make it so that the entire system and the entire game suffers because this can't do it. I mean, if they went back to Division 1 graphics for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, I don't think it would be that big of an issue for players. Right? I mean, it might be like, oh, they had to reduce the graphics. But at the same time, they want a better freaking game, right? I mean, we all want a better game. I would rather have Division 1 graphics making this a better game. All right, I mean, I'm just going to move on from that because I'm just aggravated with this situation. I'm a little, condescending, I guess. That's just what happens when you're passionate about the game. It's just, when is enough with this shit? All right, so, moving on to the next thing that he said. This is good and bad depending on how you look at it, everyone. It's him addressing, kind of that console Zim Cronus Max issue that we've had, right? A lot of people have had this issue, or at least, you can't really tell, but, you have a suspicion, right? And it's the fact that it's never really dealt with has allowed that speculation to grow and kind of become a target of easy blaming, right? Players blame this for a lot of the troubles that they have. It's very hard to actually identify that. It could be lag issues. It could be freaking, server issues. It could be all sorts of issues in the game that we're just, obviously not seeing at the time, right? It's entirely possible. And I've gotten into numerous arguments with players about this. You don't know. You never know what the issue truly is. Unless, you're actually seeing the person playing against you on a webcam or something like that, you can't really tell, right? I mean, there's things that you can do that can make it look funny or make it look fishy. And I'm not saying that this doesn't exist. I'm not saying this problem doesn't exist. I know it does. I mean, there's people that post, things and ask questions on the freaking, Zim or Cronus message boards, like, how do I get, this to work in the division or blah, blah, blah. It exists, okay? I don't think it's as rampant as we all think it is, and I think that there are fixes behind the scenes. As he said in this tweet, when he got asked about this, he says that they have codes and systems in place to kind of detect some of the worst things that these can do, right? I think that's what he's talking about. I think that they have that kind of stuff in place. But he does go on to further state that they have no way of detecting the device. Now, I don't actually know if that's 100% true. I remember something about Microsoft saying that they could actually detect these devices on the actual system. But I do know that the actual devices work through the native controllers for the system. So when you plug it in, it's basically just routing through a controller and kind of, working that way through the system. So basically what they're saying is they can't actually detect the device itself, all right? But I'm pretty sure that they can detect the inputs from that device not being controller related or not being possible or not being, like a normal controller's use, right? So that's what I think he's saying. They can't detect the actual device itself, but they probably can detect the way that the device interacts rather than, being a controller. So, I mean, take that as good or bad. I kind of don't know how to look at it. I mean, it's definitely not something that I've seen as much of a huge problem, and I think a lot of that is just due to the movement changes and some of the recoil pattern changes. Because I mean, obviously, it's not as terrible. I mean, where in Division 1, if you go back, accuracy and stability were very different. Especially with stability, I mean, some of the weapons did jump a significant amount. In Division 2, I don't actually notice that as much. I mean, there is still some jump and some weapons are unstable, but by and large, most of them are actually incredibly stable and, easy to turn into like laser beams. So I don't think it's as big of an issue, and I don't think they have as big an advantage just by using the basic features of it. Now, I think what he's saying is that if they start using other things or if they start changing it around and basically abusing the system, that's when they can detect it. That's when they actually stop it. It's more information, I think, than we've had in the past, but, it's still something worth mentioning. Okay, and then moving on to another tweet from him. This one brought up the fact that a lot of the gameplay is, I don't want to use the term casualized. As a person who isn't devoting 8 hours a day every day to streaming, I guess, to them, I would probably be a casual player, right? I don't consider myself casual. I like hardcore gameplay. So I don't consider myself casual, and I don't like casualized type stuff. What I think about is a reduction in the game's actual quality or a reduction in the game's, mechanics, just to make it easier for a single player versus, a group of two, or, reducing basically, a lot of the features of the game itself, just to make it easier for players who don't actually want to play the game that much. That's kind of what I think about when I think of casualized. People who just want it easier because. And that's what I hate about casual type stuff, right? I don't want it easier because. I don't want the grind removed because. I don't want the AI easier because. I mean, those kind of things are stupid. They ruin the games. And I know, a lot of people want to say, like, well, games are for fun and they're supposed to be fun. You're right. They are for fun. But that's why we have thousands of different games, right? What's fun for one person isn't fun for another. And if your definition of fun is Pokemon, Go or whatever, then that should be the game that you play. If the Division is, an RPG and has RPG mechanics and looter shooter, loot grindy, whatever mechanics, if it's not for you, then it should not be designed for you. It should not be designed to make it easier for you because you don't like RPGs or you don't like looting. That is not the point. That is not the statement that I believe games should be fun means, right? Games should be fun for their target audience. If the developers are intentionally ruining the game for their target audience to cater to people that don't actually enjoy this type of game on a regular basis, I think that's the problem, right? If you don't have, 20 hours a week to devote to the game, that's fine. But there's plenty of people who don't have that time to devote to the game that enjoy the mechanics and enjoy the way that it plays, right? They're not in a rush, or they're not in a hurry to get the best stuff just because. They want to take their time and enjoy the game. When you make it all about being easy and being quick and catering to players like that, it's not fun to the rest of the player base. Yeah, okay, it might be fun. It might be more fun to the players that don't do that. It might be more fun to the players who don't play an RPG or play a looter. But you know what? To the players that actually do, that's not fun. So the whole statement of, well, the games are supposed to be fun, so it's supposed to be, non-complicated and easy and not difficult, like, that's just a load of trash. Okay? If you feel that the game needs to be easy to cater to you, like, then we have a problem. The game should not be easy. The game should not be simple and basically just run down. If that is the style that the developers want to cater to, then let us know so that players that actually want to play good games don't play it. Right? I don't have fun when I can just go into the open world, open a chest, and get the best loot. Like, that is not fun. That is not entertaining. That is stupid. That's just basically a walking simulator where I just find trash. I don't want to play that. So if you disagree with me, I'm sorry on that. It's just the truth. Like, if you want to have an easy game where you don't have to do anything, don't have to think, don't have to try, go play something else. Because the game should not be designed for the lowest common denominator. It should be designed with a base system in place that actually encourages the game's mechanics. It should actually be designed to encourage gameplay, not trivial, useless, just walking around. And the final tweet, the one that I think I have the most interest in, is basically he was asked about a lot of the changes coming to it, and one of the things that we haven't really heard from, or one of the things that we haven't really heard about, are skill builds. Obviously, we've been told that a lot of the gear changes and a lot of the mechanics or AI or UI or whatever they want to call it, they're getting revamped, they're getting changed, they're getting adjusted. In relation to skills, that has not been addressed. Well, when asked about it, he basically said, that there is an enormous change coming to the way that skills are playing. I don't know, exactly how that's going to be. I mean, obviously, we can all take a guess that, with the upcoming gear changes, with the presence of the main attribute being introduced again, we can kind of correlate that skill power is going to be for skill builds. Like, if you want a skill build, you need to invest into skill power. If you want armor, you need to invest into armor. If you want damage, you need to invest into damage. And I think that's, part of what he's saying. Now, he did not necessarily, specify any specific point, right? But he was asked about, skill mods, skill power, all that stuff. And he just answered a blanket yes. So I think that means that, hopefully skill mods, I like the potential of the skill mod system, don't get me wrong. I just think that it was overly simplified, it wasn't diverse enough, it wasn't interesting, it was very limiting to skill builds in particular, and it just didn't make for a fun system. Now, if they could incorporate, some of the skill mods with a very similar system to the original Division skill power system, where, skill power boosts up your skills by a set amount, for just everything, and then as a skill build you can specify into like specific areas what you actually want to increase even more, that would be really great, right? Another possibility that I always would have liked to see is that, if as a skill power user you have more mod slots open up, right? So like, for 1,000 skill power you've got 2 slots, for 2,000 skill power you've got 3 slots, for 3,000 skill power you've got 4 slots, and like, they didn't just cap it at 3, so like if you had 4,000, you had 5, or if you had 5,000, you had 6. That would be a good use of the system, right? Because that actually gives you a tangible boost to your skills besides this kind of little piecemeal percentage-based stuff that they have now. I don't like the way that it's kind of all generalized and there's only really a differentiation between 3 different mods, or in some case 2 mods on some skills. I don't like that system. I hope they realize some of the most annoying aspects with the mods themselves, with, you need to have like 50 or 60 of some of these mods just to make sure that you have one for every build, or, it's just so aggravating that you have to have, this, you need one mod with 2.8K and one mod with 2.9K and one mod with 3K. It's just aggravating it, on every level with that stuff, especially considering that they got rid of the weapon mods because it caused clutter. But then they introduced skill mods that cause even more clutter. That was one of my biggest grievances with the game. And obviously, you can go back to, when this game first started and I was just talking about this. I hated this system, and I've hated lots of the systems in this game. And this is the perfect opportunity for them to just correct it, right? Just get it out of the way, fix it, and stop allowing it to just, fester in the community. It's terrible, and it always will be. Just fix it already. So that's what I'm hoping he's talking about. I'm hoping that they're fixing this. Now, obviously, you know what happens when you hope in the Division. It always ends badly. But I'm really just there's nothing else for me to do, with the game. I can't hate it anymore. I can't freaking be annoyed with it anymore. I can't be disappointed with it anymore. There's only it's only so low that you can go with this game. So like I said, all I can do is hope that they fix it, hope that they make it better, because there's really nowhere else to go besides that. There's nowhere else to go but up with the skills in this game. And the last thing I want to talk about, this is unrelated to really anything that he's been tweeting. It's actually more related to some of the things that Jeff Forth has been saying on his channel. I watched a video from him last night where he's basically kind of talking about the gear changes that are coming up, right? And how the community as a whole was constantly told, these are the biggest changes that are coming. We're not going to, make any more changes, blah, blah, blah. And, he was kind of annoyed, I would say, with a lot of the stuff that's coming out of the community. Now, I agree with him at a certain point, right? I understand that if you go back to Division 1, the constant refarming for your gear was aggravating, right? They would introduce a new world tier just to introduce a new world tier. There was no point to it, at all. Sometimes they had an incursion or something that was, vaguely, entertaining for a short period of time, but the gear itself was just stupid, right? They never went back and actually corrected a lot of these problems that the gear had, right? We had the same 2 knee pads for high ends the entire time. They couldn't have added a new high end knee pad with actual stuff on it. There was huge problems with what they did with Division 1, especially related to gear score and refarming all your old gear over and over and over again. It was awful, and it was pointless. They basically they made you refarm your gear without adding new content. But go farm all this gear again. Go get your god rolls again, because we just took it away from you. And that is just aggravating beyond belief, right? That was annoying as hell. And especially when it came with nerfs to some of your stuff. So it's just it just rubbed you the wrong way. And they didn't add really any new gear. There was occasionally a new exotic or something that they would add. There was no new items to farm for. There was no improved stuff to get. It was, for the most part, the same generic crap over and over again. And it wasn't until they introduced classified gear that there was actually a point or actually a reason to regrind this gear. And if most people paid attention, when they introduced classified gear, there was actually a target, and most people didn't get really angry about having to refarm again, because there was something tangible to actually go for. With every other iteration that they did, there was never anything good to get. There was never any interest in it, right? It was just do it because we have no content and we have no interest in doing anything, so we're kind of just trying to make something out of nothing. That's the entire mentality that they had, right? They didn't have new talents. They didn't add new skills, even though it was pretty obvious that they could have, and they could have just made different things. They added and changed skills in the way that they functioned. So why couldn't they have just added different functioning skills on top of what they already had? They didn't add new mods. They didn't add new perks. There was no incentive to do anything, right? They could have added. I'm a little bit rusty on my Division 1 terminology, so I don't exactly remember what they're called. But when you had the red, yellow, and blue points to spend in your base of operations to basically unlock talents and stuff like that. Why couldn't they have made more side missions? They didn't even have to really add more content. They could have just added a few freaking side missions, just randomly, and made more of these currency points to spend, and basically just unlock, more talents and stuff like that. They could have done simple things to improve the game. that they never even bothered to try, and that was just aggravating, right? That whole system with how they addressed gear changes and how they addressed, the new world tiers. That was just the epitome of awful. Okay, I'm not going to stand by it. I love the game, but I'm not going to stand by the way that they did that. With Division 2, it's worried me that they keep, they've revamped things over and over and over again. And we've been stuck at 500 now for months, and they just keep revamping stuff, right? That is the problem that we had with the original game. And that is annoying. That is aggravating. But at the same time, they're not just bumping the gear score. They didn't just bump the gear score. They actually changed gear. They actually changed things on gear. They added different roles, and they've tweaked things, right, that have kept it interesting, which isn't necessarily bad. Because one of the things that Jeff Forth was talking about was that as a YouTuber, he's got all this content and all these builds and everything that are basically going to become irrelevant because everything will change. Which I understand that point, okay? I don't want my build videos to, basically just kind of be like a useless relic that have been, pushed to the side. But at the same time, as a content creator, I look forward to being able to actually build new things and take a look at new mechanics and, help players understand, the new features or the new things that they do to the game. That's part of what I guess my responsibility is as a creator on YouTube to, the player base. That's something that I take as a responsibility of mine. I want to push out the right information and push out the good information and basically offer you guys what is there in the game now. Whether it was, if it was a year old content, that's irrelevant, it's not present now. Everything changes and all the mechanics change and things, happen differently, and, you have to adjust to that. This is a great opportunity because, we've had huge issues with the game currently. And, one of the biggest ones is the vendor reset items, right? Players are upset that, they didn't clan hop to, 15 clan or, 20 clan or whatever the heck was going on to get some of these god roll, 30%, 25% type of rolls, right? They didn't get that because the mechanics are just stupid, it was terrible, right? This reset of the gear gets rid of those. These god roll issues that had, kind of created toxicity in the community are going to be gone. They're going to be wiped clean. It's going to start over again. They're going to be starting over with the system kind of fixed, right? So you're not going to be able to go back and get these god roll items from vendors in the future. So they're removing them from the past. So you can't really have this issue, right, where it's this huge problem in the community where players are like, well, if PvP is unfair because they got these god roll items from clan hopping and I don't have them, or I came to the game late and I don't have any of this stuff, there's no way for me to get it. That's one of the issues that this will fix. Another issue that this is fixing is basically just the gear power with armor and skill and damage all kind of being combined together, right? Like that's a huge issue where you're not having these you're not having balanced builds. You're not having these builds with, with a give and take. You're having 500k armor with 3000 skill power and 100% damage. And it's a terrible system. And this update, what at least they're proposing, at least what they've told us they're proposing, goes in and fixes these things. So I would much rather have things being fixed than sitting around with a bad system just because I don't want my videos to be ruined, right? I would much rather have the game actually being in a good place for everyone than just benefiting content creators. Now, I'm not saying anything bad. I understand his points. I understand the point that Jeff Forth was making, right? It's annoying, but there's a good side to it, right? We can all agree that talents have been busted. I talked about this on a previous video where talents actually add more weapon damage than the actual stats on your gear. And that's stupid. That's ridiculous. That's not something that should be encouraged with the game, right? That is, I'm hoping to God that is fixed, because a lot of these issues that I've already talked about, they're causing PvP to suffer. They're causing PvE to be terrible, right? You go on the forums and you look, oh, this is ruining PvP. This is ruining PvE. And it's just so rampant and so common that, you can't get away from it in the current system. You have to revamp this because, look, I've been saying it since the very beginning of the game. They did a terrible job with the loot mechanics of this game. They did a terrible job with the stat mechanics of this game. I've made a couple videos telling you how they ruined it, why it's bad, why it's terrible, why talents suck, why skills suck, why attributes suck. This is the stuff that I've kind of been trying to push towards, right? The system that they have is bad. What I want is a good system. So if my videos lose meaning because the developers are actually doing what I want them to, which is fixing the actual game, I really can't be upset they ruined the videos that I put out previously when they're actually doing what the whole goal of my channel is actually around. And that's basically just making the game a better place, right? And as a content creator, having a better game helps me overall because it actually just encourages more viewers to my channel. It increases the viewership of my videos. It brings more players back to the game and makes the game feel better. So, at the end of the day, I don't want the game to be in a bad spot just so that my previous videos can get more views, right? I don't want the game to be in a bad place just so that builds that I made in the past are still relevant. Now, it would be great if those build videos still applied in every single aspect. But the reality is they don't. And every time they patch something or every time they tweak something, those build videos become obsolete anyway. Over 90% of my build videos probably still don't actually apply to 1.6.1. I mean, even ones that I released in 1.6 might not even apply because, they fixed things. Just like they fixed perfect insulated and regular insulated working together on my clutch build, so that I can't have 100% hazard protection on that build anymore. Now I could change it and I could make another build, but that just goes to show you, just a little bit ago when they fixed an error that they had already caused, that I took advantage of, that video became obsolete as soon as they did it. So to live in the past and hope that my videos stay relevant forever is misguided in terms of actually helping the game. And as a content creator, I think that should be the number one goal, right? You have a lot of content creators who are all about them and their channel. My channel is not about me. My channel is not a showcase of how great I am at PvP. My number one goal has been, and pretty much always will be, is to ensure that the Division 2 is represented properly, is basically, given good feedback, is trying to move towards a place where the game is improved upon. And, my secondary goal is to offer content that helps the player base. I don't need to showcase how awesome I am. I don't need to showcase how amazing my gameplay is, right? If players want to see me playing, fine. But that's not the goal of my channel. My goal is to improve the game, improve the player base, improve every aspect of the game itself, not to just improve my YouTube channel. I do look forward to the changes that are coming to the game. Will it be enough? That I don't know. I can't tell you. We're not going to know for some time whether, if these changes are actually worth it. I mean, I don't know when these updates are actually going to fully happen, right? I don't know when they're going to add more content because I would assume that they're not going to add more content until they actually get these changes solidified. So I really hope that these changes come quickly. I mean, one of the biggest problems that the game has, regardless of what you actually enjoy in the game, is content. It has very little content. They don't add anything. They're not adding enough. They're not adding it fast enough. Whatever you want to say, it's not meeting the demands of the player base, and they're losing players because of it. I really hope that they add more content, and it definitely needs to be more than a mission or two. That is not content. I mean, that's a pittance. That's like a pity party right there. It's terrible. At the end of the day, guys, all we can do is realize this is a game. I can try to offer as many opinions on the game as I feel are necessary, but there comes a time when it's just I need to just wash my hands of the game. If the game's not designed for you, okay, fine. If the game is designed for you, then it should be fun for you. And if it's not, and it's time to move on, guys. I mean, I don't want to say that the game's dead. I mean, the game's not dead. I mean, there's still people playing it, and it does appear that developers are still working on the game. All right, guys. So basically, just to sum up my opinions on the game, like it's It's in a bad spot. I mean, we all know that. There's no getting around it, right? There's just no denying that the game is in a terrible, terrible spot, and a lot of it appears to be baked into the actual game since development, right? They just made terrible, terrible choices, and now they're basically just suffering from it, right? And I don't feel pity or remorse for the developers. I mean, they consciously made these terrible decisions. I mean, I was saying this before the game even released. Seeing the teasers that they put out for the game, I knew that the system was going to be bad. I said so in the forums that the system was going to be bad. I was not really looking forward to the game. I was really just fearful that this game was going to end up the way that it has. I don't like being right in this situation. I don't like knowing that everything I said was pretty much true, and the game became a wasteland, right? It was just a wasted effort. It was pointless. They should have taken all the effort that they put into this game and just used it to improve Division 1. Would they have made more money? Well, probably not. They probably wouldn't have made as much money. But you know what? They wouldn't have a player base that thinks their entire team is incompetent. Could they have made a good amount of money selling additional DLC? Yeah, I'm pretty sure they could have. It's just, I guess their priorities were different than ours, right? As a player base, their developer priorities were much different than our actual consumer priorities. And I think it goes into showing, the end product, right? Their end product is not as good or as refined as we expected to see. The options and the choices that they made in the game have basically just backfired on them over and over and over again. Everything that they've done with this game, every change that they've made from the original Division, has basically come across as worse. The players are not, oh man, these are such good changes. No, most of them are terrible. Most of them have been rebelled against since the start. And I think probably the most humorous part about it is, and the most ironic part about it is, some of the changes that they actually made that I agreed with are the changes that they removed the quickest. If you look at the weapon mods, they had substantial negatives. That actually did bring a lot of diversity to the weapon mod selection process. And that was the whole point of it, right? That was the whole point of having these changes to the weapons. Well, of course, they pandered and they, gave up on their vision for why they're actually doing something. And they're just, they use the excuse of, well, it doesn't feel good. You know what? A lot of things don't feel good. But the whole point of the game is to make it balanced. Well, now we're in a situation where we're in because, you don't know what to stand by and you don't know what to freaking remove. They have no idea what they're doing as developers, I think. From my perspective, it just seems like they just want to silence as many people as fast as they can about anything. It's like, oh, they have a problem with weapon mods? Okay, well, let's just get rid of that system and just make it very, very simple. Let's make it really easy. Let's avoid all of the problem. We tried to avoid the issues that we had in Division 1, but we're just going to basically just revert to that and make it best in slot anyway, without even having to work for it. I don't really know of any player that doesn't use the plus 20 assault rifle magazine, right? You lose 10% reload speed, but who the hell cares? I mean, you get 20 extra rounds. I don't know of anybody that doesn't use that. I mean, there's no real variety there. I mean, there's nothing. The whole point of the system was to force hard choices, and they just keep going back on the hard choices decision, right? They don't want to make players choose things. They don't actually want to improve the game. They just want to appease the player base, right? And that's the problem with the game. When you just go around appeasing and appeasing and appeasing without actually making the hard choices to improve the game, you end up with a crappy product that we have now, right? They've basically just used the player base and the player feedback as a very generalized focus group where they just remove all of the negative pieces without actually improving the game. These aren't negative things. They're just things that people don't like. They offer a lot of benefit to the actual game as a whole. They offer a lot of balance to the game. Since the developers have pretty much just lost their stones, the game is in a constant cycle of just being dumbed down and being reduced and basically just being a depressing thing. Balance does not come because you gave everyone what they want. Balance does not come because you removed the things that people don't like. Balance to a game does not happen because players were complaining that the AI was too hard, so you just, murdered the amount of damage that they could do. Or you basically just increased the amount of damage that the player can do to the AI. That's not balance. They tried to do some easy appeasement without actually taking calculation of the entire game as a whole. And that seems to be the biggest issue with the Division itself, right? They make easy changes that don't really, seem like they're going to affect many things in the game. But then they keep making changes and they all combine to basically just make a pile of shit. This is something that they've done since Division 1. Right, where they would just make an incremental change, and they'd make another change, and they make another change, and eventually they would just make so many changes that the base mechanics of the game were just wrong. Right, the things just didn't work the way that they should have anymore. Things were abused because of it. And it was constantly just they didn't understand it. They would make 20 nerfs to something when all they needed to do was make one nerf. They would buff something and then remove all the freaking possible counters to it. And it was just a bad system in general. They didn't prioritize player options over easy nerfing, right? It wasn't like they didn't want to force the players to make a choice on diversity. They just wanted to give them what they wanted just to keep them happy. It's like, oh, skill damage is too strong, so I don't want to use hazard protection, so just reduce skill damage for me. Like that's pretty much we've got too many entitled people in this game who want things nerfed for no other reason than just to nerf them, because they don't want to actually try to figure out a way to stop it. Right? You see it on the forums all the time. People complaining about the new meta or this thing or that thing. The biggest problem that I have with a lot of these kind of people in the community is that they don't talk about what it should do or how it should work or improvements that should be made or rationalize the actual problems with that piece or with that talent or with that gear in general. They just tend to complain about it without actually thinking about it. They just want to complain and ruin it for everyone else, basically. They just want to vent their frustration and kind of just give off this toxic cloud of self-importance to their cause, right? It's like, oh, I got killed by an explosion. Explosions are doing too much damage. It's like, deal with it, right? Put on explosion resistance. There's things you can do, and if you don't want to do them, that's your fault. If you want to have your build and that's it, that's your fault, right? If you don't want to counter things, that's not the game's fault. That's the game working as intended. And if the developers actively side with players that are just complaining for no reason, that's when we end up with a game that is like the Division 2 right now. When the developers don't have a backbone on the direction that they actually want their game to go, when the developers decide to defend their terrible decision making with appeasement, this is where we get problems. And the ultimate slimy move that the developers tend to do is say, well, it's not fun. You know what? That's an easy excuse. If you want to say something is not fun, it's because you ruined the system. The game is fun. The game could be fun. The game should be fun. If you have balance and if you have things working as intended and you actually make players abide by the mechanics of the game without appeasing to their every whim, the game will be fun. Defending a terrible decision, defending a terrible mechanic change, defending, just garbage playstyle with we want it to be fun for everyone. We want it to be easy and fun. Like that is doing your game a disservice, and it's disgusting. All right, guys, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. I've probably been talking for way too long, and I just, I can't do it anymore. So, I hope you understand where I'm coming from. I hope, you agree with me, at least for the most part. I don't want this game to be, a soggy sponge of wishes and friggin' good feelings. It's supposed to be a challenging, interesting, player-driven game, not a dev appeasement process, right? That's my take on it. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you understand. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in another one.